I am the child of Iniginzimu, the southerly winds. That's where I inherited the restlessness of my soul, of my mind, in search of a balanced spirit. Who am I? I'm a soul that emerged from the stench and the gutter of oppression and breathed hope in the atmosphere of despair. Child of an evangelist father and Isangoma uncle, I traverse the two worlds in search of that balance. I am an African caressed by African winds, trade and anti-trade, washed by her many rivers, pure and impure, endurance tested by the rugged edges of Mount Kilimanjaro and Ukahlamba. Within the retina of my eye, in the midst of sandstorms, I carry a clear vision of our rebirth. I swear by every grain of sand in the Sahel and the Khalahadi. I tasted the fragrance of dawn in Nyanga, Langa, Guguletu, and in Soweto. In my mother's womb, I was a neighbor to a bullet, and today I taste the fruits of freedom in my land. I am the one that hallucinates in forms. I hallucinate shapes. I hallucinate my sculptures. I chew bones. I grind stones. I melt metal. I walk through the dense forest of ugliness in order to create the beauty of the universe, a universe of my soul. The journey that has taken us back to this scent of invisible footprints, this retrospective exhibition, has been a very long and a very varied one. It is the one where, working in exile, I found myself like creating on stilts. I was like a Caravaggio painting on the run. It began when I was a teenager and my uncle asked me to sit in front of a tree and instructed me to sit there until the tree speaks to me. And when the tree spoke, then I saw this very ugly face standing, staring at me, through the tree. Years later in exile, I created my first sculpture. Marginalized, unknown, and not knowing much about the country where I was, I felt like I was affected by a plague, contaminated. And in order that I must bring myself into the center of the universe, that is myself, then I began raiding scrapyards, looking for exhaust pipes, looking for old discarded wheelbarrows. I went to derelict places to retrace bones, benefiting from Dutch elm wood that had collapsed, in London. And the creation of those was, in a sense, a titanic, battle. But because for me, the creation of the work that we see displayed, around me, it's like I'm a bullfighter, and the material that I use, it is that veritable bull. And the sense of creativity is a red flag. No, that is. For sculpture, to me, it's like a bullfight. It bruises, it maims, it bends, it breaks your soul, but in the process of this, you recreate the sense of self, of who you are in exile, seeking forever to return to the native land. On a Saturday morning, driving from Kwandebele to KwaZulu-Natal with my family, we encountered vultures hovering in the air. Immediately I knew that where vultures are, there are bones. And bones hold a particular fascination for me, for sculpture. I went to retrieve some bones, only to find myself plunged into a powerful war with the vultures. But what came out was the bones that I used for creation of some of the pieces that are part of the scent of invisible footprints. Sankofa. That bone carries up its title from a mythological bird, from West Africa in Ghana, which is a bird that flies to the past in order to lead us, to the future. It just tells us that Newtonian, physics of left and right, good and bad, is not adequate to articulate a far much more powerful African philosophical concepts. Sankofa then fuses the past and the present, the good and the bad, into one capsule, of meaning. And with the other bone, I created the healer's dance. The healer's dance is part of a pelvic of a cow. And it's flowing and it's movement and the shadows that it casts, just kind of reveals the particular movement of that healing rituals that traditional healers hold. And then the concept of a wounded healer, as exemplified by one of the sculptures, is that when somebody dies, they go to the land of the ancestors. And when they arrive there, they go through some purgatory. And when they are rejected, they come back to possess some of the people who are still living, with the hope that these negative spirits that they actually bring can then be redirected towards the healing power of it. So that's where then the healing powers of the wounded healer emanate from. An exile is a divided soul. You carry the reality of where you are and also the reality of where you come from. Where did I come from when I was in exile? I came from the land of splendor, the land of scenic beauty, the land of Cathedral Peak, where giant boulders stood erect like statues, commanding the universe to bow at their own feet. And then in creating my stone sculptures, it was an attempt to capture in miniature the beauty of the landscape, of my land. But then as I do this, then the realities that affect me then come and impose themselves, and I cannot reject them. In coming up with a stone like digital desires, I've got to use a stone, but that stone must have a brain of a circuit board of in a computer to link the time immemorial as well as the futuristic, the pieces that I want to do. And in returning back to my land, I discovered that there's a stone called quartz, which has got the veins of blood. And the veins of blood are some of the demonstrations that we see up on the roads, people crying for service delivery. It is called service delivery blues. And then it speaks for itself. And there are other stones here of my land, dark stones like dolorite. Dolorite is a stone that is ground into small pieces so that you can build a tarmac. And out of it, I can create Nzinga, the warrior queen of Angola, who is, ironically, uncrushable. Exile has always made me to celebrate, trees. Trees are always rooted to their own soil, while at the same time, reaching, for the stars. And when I carve a tree, it carries echoes of my home. It carries my beginnings. The fluids, the shapes, of them determine the nature of the sculpture that I'm going to create. The anatomy of struggle is about a fallen hero. In this case, it was Steve Bantu Biko. And where it has fallen, a chain leads to the fetus. The fetus leads to a rebirth to demonstrate the continuity of our struggles then and the impossibility of defeat. And right about the same time, still we rise. It's a piece that was created with layers of people, one on top of the other. When in 1976 our youth from Soweto stood against rebellion, stood against oppression, stood against guns and live bullets, and today we are celebrating their triumph. The Dogon people of Mali have got a very fascinating myth of the origin about Nomo. Nomo was the first human being that was created by Ama, the sky god. But this Nomo then duplicated itself into 4 sets of twins, and one of the twins rebelled against the order. So Nomo is the word water, Nomo is the word beginning, and Nomo is the primordial ancestors that point to the present, the future, and our past. Triangular Trade and Rivonia are two sculptures that were created out of a 200-year-old forest mahogany that fell in one of the parks, in Durban. These were carved in order to tell the stories of what some of the woods had witnessed during the 200 years. Triangular Trade is one of them. The theft of young human beings into the cotton fields of America, and cotton taken back to London and London back to Africa, that kind of a triangular trade with all the chains that are still embedded on a tree that was kept alive. And of course, Rivonia is about that kind of a conspiracy for our liberation, that were the people who were a veritable nucleus of a rainbow nation set and plotted our future. It has become apparently clear, to me, that our agreement, our compact between us, and nature is skewed. It has gone very wrong. And that we as a society have become a very excremental society. Pollution that we see around and the disregard of the environment. And if you've got any doubts about this, you have to go to the nearest scrapyard and to see how much we just throw about. It becomes then very necessary for me that as an act of creation and as a contribution towards our own environment, that I've got to rescue some wheelbarrows, exhaust pipes, gearbox, diffs and pinions, a variety of these metal that has got to be carved and shaped and welded into a set of meanings, giving these old materials a new life. I work with gearboxes and diff and pinions to make human heads carrying themselves very high and proudly. The diff and the pinion inside that gearbox that becomes a head, it becomes an opinion that moves the cogs of thought, of ideologies, of philosophies, of religions, and of belief systems. I use proletarian in art. I use a wheelbarrow as a metaphor for the workers themselves, who when they attain some position of power, start pushing the other wheelbarrows around until the wheelbarrow says, please don't push me around anymore. Creating a work of art, for me, it's not just only about myself, it is also a conversation with other artists, with other people, with other ideas. I communicate and have a discussion with Picasso, with Alberto Giacometti. I also carried out with Modigliani in this particular retrospective. So Modigliani's Celestial Dreams is about the dreams I have for Modigliani, who died very young. I celebrate his life. What am I? I am an artist whose soul traverses unknown universes of form, unknown universes of ideas. I am a poet that sculpts dreams, that sculpts desires. I am a desire-seeking expression. Each and every piece of art that I create becomes a universe of endless possibilities.